If you like recording music, whether as a hobby or as a professional, you're used to seeing a lot of videos online, especially on YouTube. You're gonna see a mic A, mic B comparison where it's a shootout, maybe a blind test where you're hearing someone sing the same song over and over and over again. Maybe you're used to seeing charts and diagrams about frequency responses, about noise, about diaphragms. All that kind of stuff, honestly, is overwhelming for me. I still watch it all the time. What I've noticed year after year is I end up getting out a credit card because somebody told me that the latest and greatest microphone was here. This is the microphone that does everything you need it to do. So you purchase the product only to then later be listing it on Reverb. Well, here are 4 microphones that I want to recommend to you, no matter what point you're at in your career or if you're just doing this as a hobby. These are 4 microphones that I wholeheartedly believe that I can make a recommendation to you. I'm not being sponsored for this video. I don't have any affiliate links. I just want to make this as if you were sitting in the room with me today. These are 4 microphones that have a few things to say about each of them, or why you should consider them. The first microphone, of course, is the Shure SM57. The Shure SM57, no matter if you're beginning or if you're in Blackbird Studios, they're gonna have SM57s all over the place. These things are, for one, they're rugged, built like a tank, and if you're getting one off of Reverb or one that's used, it doesn't matter if it has marks and chips on the outside, it's gonna be just fine. This thing is built like a tank. You can drop this many a times. You can hit it with a drumstick because it's often used on snare drum. It's gonna take a beating. Now, when it comes to listening to the Shure SM57, Jim Lill did a video. It's an awesome video. You need to check it out if you have the time, about different microphones. And one of the things he said in that video is that this SM57 is what he would call flat. Now, the frequency response is not flat on an SM57, but for decades and decades, we've all been hearing the SM57 on all of the music that we love. Just about every snare drum sound that you've heard has been recorded with a Shure SM57. What makes these microphones fantastic is that they are dynamic microphones, but they're also extremely affordable. If you're in the used market, say you're on Reverb, you can easily pick one up for $80 or $90 used. They run about $100 or $110 brand new. Pick one up used if you can. You will always be using a Shure SM57. Now, these don't have to just be used on acoustic or electric guitars or drums. You can also use them on vocals. So if you're someone starting out and you really don't want to put a lot of money just yet into recording, well, I think the first microphone you should consider is a dynamic microphone, the Shure SM57. Even if it's not your cup of tea, it's something that you're going to want to keep with you, because when you're in a pinch or someone comes over to record, you take out a Shure SM57, they're probably going to know all about it. So get yourself a Shure SM57. Even if you have regrets, like I was saying, stick it in a drawer somewhere. You're going to be using it over and over again. When I hear the SM57, specifically on my acoustic guitar or on my vocal, the thing that it does is the top end seems to be a little bit crispy. Now, that crispy, you take it for what it's worth. It's not crispy that's particularly like pleasing to listen to. I think it can come across as being a little bit harsh and a little bit thin. Now, if you're recording a snare drum, crispiness sounds great, because with snare drums, we're used to hearing that kind of thwack sound, that really aggressive sound. So I think the SM57, this is not scientific, this is just me putting my own vocabulary to it. It's a little bit crispy, and it's got not a lot of body to it, okay? So if you're used to having a lot of weight, like recording bass guitar, anything like that, you might be a little bit disappointed with the SM57. But again, many people, I think there have even been albums recorded, entire drum kits recorded with just an SM57. If you can make it work with an SM57, then your mixing skills can easily compensate for whatever the microphone might be lacking. And that's going to be true with all microphones. My next recommendation is the Shure SM7B. You've seen this all over YouTube People use this for speaking. People use this on podcasts like the Joe Rogan podcast. They'll use the Shure SM7B. It is a great dynamic microphone that has a great representation of the human voice. It's got a lot lower lows than I'd say the SM57 has, and it doesn't have that crispiness of the 57. It actually sounds a little bit duller, which can be pleasing because when we put this on a snare drum has a lot of beef to it, and it also has those highs. And ways that you can manage the high end on the SM7 is on the back, they actually have a switch where you can engage a high shelf, or you can actually remove the foam screen that comes on the SM7. It comes off just like one of those solo cups. You can take this off and you'll have a little bit more detail in the high end when you're using it. Now, if you're just really into recording, you know that this is going to be something that you're definitely interested in pursuing. Rather than spending your money on the SM57, if you have it in your budget and you want to spring for the SM7, I put it in the same ballpark as the 57. If you have an SM7 sitting around, even if you're not using it that week, somebody comes in to record, you tell them you have an SM7, they're gonna know how it's used and you're gonna be glad that you have it. So best of both worlds, if you can get yourself an SM57 and an SM7, you're gonna be set to go, especially when it comes to dynamic microphones. All right, my next recommendation, I know this looks crazy janky, as I say, this is a Rode NT2A. This is one of the first microphones I ever purchased. It does have some electrical tape at the top. That is because the windscreen right here has popped off. The glue that was holding it in there, it just became loose. So no big deal, I just have some tape on mine. The shock mount that's on it has also been replaced. This is one from Amazon. I think this thing runs like 15 bucks or so, and it has different attachments you can put on. So if you have different condenser microphones, check this one out on Amazon. It's one of the first ones that comes up when you type in shock mount. But back to the NT2A, this is my first large diaphragm condenser microphone. Large diaphragm condenser microphones, just like I was saying, from the SM57 to the SM7, we have a little bit more detail. A large diaphragm condenser mic will have even more detail, a little bit more nuance than the SM7B. This thing has a lot of features as well. You can go figure 8 pattern, meaning it's recording on the front and the back as well. You can go to cardioid 9 times out of 10. I just keep this in cardioid anyway. That means you just sing into the front of the microphone and the back is being rejected. And this also has an omnidirectional setting. So if you have people that want to sing around the microphone, if you're doing groups, this is the most versatile microphone that I've owned. It was my first large diaphragm condenser mic, and more importantly, the more familiar you can get with one microphone and how you can use it, the more possibilities that are open to you. This also has a low cut filter that you can engage to roll off 40 hertz or 80 hertz if you choose to. And then it has a pad for 5 decibels or 10 decibels. So if you want to use this on snare drum or electric guitar, you will need to be using the pad because this thing is very sensitive. It can easily get overloaded. So whereas the SM57 and the SM7, you stick them on a guitar amp or a loud vocal, you're going to be just fine. Adjust your gain settings accordingly. This one you need to be a little bit more careful with because even when you're going to record on your interface, you could have the gain knob on your interface turned all the way down, but if you're putting this on a snare drum, it'll be clipping before it even gets to your interface. So make sure you're careful with that. This does have a lot more detail, and the downside of this one is when it comes to the high end. So when I'm recording a vocal, specifically a female vocal like my wife's vocal, a lot of times it makes the high end a little bit hard to manage. So if I start boosting high frequencies with this microphone, it comes across as pretty harsh. Now, I've used the Soothe plugin from Oak Sound or Oka Sound. The Soothe plugin is great. You can use it on harsh frequencies and things like that, and it'll kind of filter those out. But just be aware when you're using something like the NT2A, any large diaphragm condenser that's less than $400 or $500, you might have problems with this because what they're trying to do, they're trying to give you all of the information that you'd expect from a large diaphragm condenser, but they're also trying to cut some corners so that the price is as low as possible. But for decades now, I've been using the NT2A. This one hangs in there. And if you're buying a large diaphragm condenser microphone, again, you're just getting started out, you're not sure you want to spend big bucks on it, get yourself a used one. Just make sure it's in great or excellent condition. When you're getting it, these things can be broken a lot easier than the Shure microphones I mentioned earlier. All right, my next recommendation is the Neumann TLM103. Now this microphone, definitely anytime you see a Neumann, it's gonna get a lot of eyeballs and a lot of clicks on YouTube. I totally understand that. When I first heard this microphone, when my wife sang into it, we both had this moment of, wow, that sounds like you. Whatever you put in front of this microphone, you're going to hear it played back on the recording and it sounds exactly the same. My acoustic guitar, okay, you're watching this on YouTube. So you hear the example of the SM57, you hear the example of the SM7, the Rode NT2A, sounds like an acoustic guitar, but I'm telling you that when I hear the TLM103 on my acoustic guitar, I listen back to it and I think, that sounds like my acoustic guitar. It sounds like whatever you put in front of it. And to me, that's been my goal with a lot of recording, okay? I don't like to record something and then listen back to it and it sound completely different than when I initially heard it. So the TLM103, it is very expensive. So this should not be your first microphone if you're looking to get into recording. I hope you can hear this in the examples of me just playing the acoustic guitar. I didn't do a lot of scientific testing. I tried to set the microphones in about the same place. I tried to play about the same thing on the acoustic guitar. But one thing I can tell you is that when I listen to the recording of the TLM103, that sounds like my acoustic guitar. The high-end stuff I've been talking about with all these microphones, I think that this one, for once, this sounds lush. And when I listen back to a recording of the TLM103, I think more about compression than I do EQ. If you're in a recording situation and you're listening to a playback and you're thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to deal with that high end, or I'm gonna have to deal with that low end resonance, that might be a sign that you need to switch out the microphone that you're trying. Because I think all of our goals is that you set up a microphone. Don't you wanna set up a microphone in front of something or someone, hit record, and be satisfied with the sound coming across? That should be the goal of all of us. Now we use tools like compression and EQ to bring out certain things we want to emphasize. But with microphones, hopefully you're not in a situation where you're already working backwards, okay? You're already behind the game when you're recording. That might be a sign that you have a bad microphone or a microphone that's not satisfying to you. I hope you'll consider something like the Neumann TLM103 because I want you to have that same feeling of, I'm satisfied with the sounds that I'm getting recorded with this microphone. I get this high end that sounds more lush to me than harsh. I don't have any harshness. I don't have any crispiness. The low end, the high end, it's all there on this microphone. So I'm completely satisfied with it. So whether you're just getting started out or you've been playing for quite a while, I think all four of these microphones are things that you need to consider in your mic locker so that you can be satisfied with your recordings and have a little bit of diversity among all the different microphone options out there. Of course, I'd love to know what microphones you believe are your desert island microphones. You can let me know in the comments section what microphones are you using, and more importantly, what microphones have you been most satisfied with when you're recording? Could just be an SM57, could be an SM7B. Curious to know, so let me know in the comments section. I want to thank you again for watching this video. Hope you consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you next time.